100 years ago, the unsinkable Titanic sank in the Atlantic. Today, on Special Moments in Orthodoxy, Father Christopher Metropolis reminds us that hubris is no match for humility in a Titanic lie.
Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to see you here on Palm Sunday. On April 15th, which is next Sunday, it will be 100 years since the sinking of the Titanic. The unsinkable, by the way, Titanic. And you want to say to yourself right now, the priest has lost his mind. Why is he talking about the Titanic? There's a reason to my madness, so stay with me for a few minutes. The ship went down in frigid waters off the North Atlantic after hitting an iceberg and took with it 1,517 people to the depths of the ocean, to their deaths, shocking the world. As we gather for worship this week, heading up to next week, people all over the world are engaging in centennial memorials to this event that continues to capture our imagination. The question is, why this morbid fascination? Well, the scale of the disaster certainly has something to do with it. Then there's the star-studded, crossed, romantic image of the fateful voyage as a clash of class and culture are portrayed by Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet in the wildly popular movie in 1997, The Disaster, the kind of Romeo and Juliet on the North Atlantic. You can probably watch on a continuous loop next Sunday TV shows about the Titanic. We're so fascinated with the story that it has to do with the fact of a sinking ship that continues to be a morality play about what happens when people buy into their own hubris, their own hype. If the Titanic teaches us anything, it is that we are all, indeed all of us, seriously sinkable. The people aboard the Titanic on April 8th, 1912, in Southampton, surely believed in its unsinkable reputation. But it's important to note, however, that the White Star Line never itself claimed that the flagship was unsinkable. That was the product of media hype from such sources as the Belfast Morning News and the Shipbuilder, which noted the captain saying, "By simply moving an electric switch, instantly I can close the doors throughout the ship and make the vessel practically unsinkable." While the White Star Line may not have been the source of the unsinkable moniker, the company surely didn't discourage it either. As the world turned into the 19th and the 20th century, emerging inventions such as electricity, internal combustible engines, the prospect of powered manned flight led many to believe that humanity could conquer any challenge with technology. For example, the Titanic's captain, Edward Smith, had commented a few years earlier that the nature of modern shipbuilding in the early 20th centuries rendered sinking a near impossibility. "I cannot imagine," he said, "any condition which would cause a ship to founder. I cannot conceive of a vital disaster happening to this vehicle." Modern shipbuilding has gone far beyond that. Captain Smith, though, was last seen on the bridge of the Titanic having given the order to abandon ship. We will never know, but in the last few moments before going down, did he remember his last words? Indeed, the whole story of the Titanic is full of hubris, based on the idea that such a large, imposing modern ship could not possibly sink in a disaster. While they may have never said it aloud, the Titanic's designers, agent, leadership, even its passengers, had clearly bought into the hype. Yet mistakes were made. All you have to do is tonight when you go home, Google Titanic blunders, and you will see a list of both factual and legendary mistakes that sent the ship to the bottom of the ocean. The upshot of all this put together is that the Titanic was sunk by the human tendency to ignore bad news and to buy into our own hype. Human hubris, in other words, was the real tip of the iceberg of light and liars. It's interesting that the lectionary, the readings, offer us the text from 1 John on a day when human hubris is remembered on a large scale. After telling his readers about the apostolic credentials as the eyewitness to the life, death, and resurrection of Christ, the Word of life, John proceeds to summarize and to expound upon the message that Christ himself brought, that God is the light, and in him there is no darkness. Scholars debate whether 1 John and the writer of the Gospel were one and the same, but it's quite apparent that at least they focused on the same themes of darkness and light. There, Jesus' life is described, carefully listen, as the light of the people that shines in darkness, and darkness cannot overcome it. In both texts, darkness defines itself apart from God, while light represents truth and glory with God. In 1 John, however, the writer defines darkness more specifically in the terms of self-deception. If we believe in fellowship with God, and yet we continue to sin anyway, then the reality is we're still walking in darkness. No more excuses. Indeed, doing so makes us liars. If we believe we have no sin, I'm a good person. If we have the hubris to claim that we're unsinkable and perfect, then we're engaged in the ultimate self-deception. Not only are we liars when we buy into our own sinful hype, but we make Jesus a liar too, because he has cleansed us. Confident in the flawless perfection of their ship, the crew of the Titanic pushed her full speed ahead into the cold darkness of the Atlantic Ocean that night, believing there was no obstacle that she could overcome. That was a fatal mistake. Below decks, there were major design flaws, an inadequate rudder, and no way to compensate for the wreck. If we're not paying attention to the major disasters and design flaws in our own lives, the biggest one being our sinful nature, then we too will have the tendency to charge ahead deeper and deeper and deeper into darkness, apart a life from God, while believing that we can do anything on our own. Eventually, we are headed for a crash of epic proportions. But there are 3 ways, and I want you to listen carefully, 3 ways to avoid that self-deception. The first one is to be honest. It's a hard thing to do today. How do we avoid the wreckage? John encouraged his readers to take a good look below the deck, not above the deck. We all like to look at how we look in the mirror. We have hair. We don't have hair. We're fat. We're thin. Who cares? Marketing cares. People who sell you things care. God doesn't care. He made each of you, every single one of you, in his image and likeness. He put in you that divine image that none of us can destroy. It's the likeness that we mess up. And that's the thing that we have to work to. So we have to be honest. If we're having troubles, we have to step forward and say we're having those troubles. The second thing we have to do is we have to slow down. We text message, we email, videos, constantly 24/7 news. We never slow down. We are not wired for that, people. We're not wired for that. We blow up, we burn up. We have to slow down. As my papu used to say, smell the roses, pedimu. Slow it down. You went by so fast. You saw the beauty, but you never smelt it. Why? Siga. Slow down. The third thing is to confess. If we confess our sins, He who is faithful will forgive us our sins and cleanse us of our unrighteousness. Confession is the first step towards avoiding disaster because it causes us to identify the leaks and the holes in our own vessel. When we confess our sins, we're being honest with God about who we are, and we throw ourselves at the mercy of God's righteous judgment. Father Spiro and I will be here tonight, Monday night, and Tuesday night for as long as it takes for those of you that want to come to Holy Confession, and we ask that you please just sign up on the sheets that are the narthex on your way out. It's better to name the problems, my dear friends, before you leave the port. In other words, then wait until an iceberg hits you. Rather than continuing to steam ahead in the dark, John urges us to wait for the light so we can navigate safely. The 1,517 people who went down with the Titanic did not have a second chance to overcome the ship's fatal mistake. But 100 years later, there are those who are proving that those waters can be navigated safely if you have the right things in place. On April 8th, 2012, today, the MS Balmoral will operate the same parent company as the Titanic. It will launch from Southampton on a 100th anniversary cruise that will follow the Titanic's route, stopping at 2:20 a.m., April 15th, and holding a memorial service for those who were lost. Along the way, guess what? Passengers will be treated to identical menus, the same music, the same entertainment, by new people, of course, as well as lectures on the Titanic's loss. No mention is made in the brochure, by the way, about safety or lifeboats. Presumably there will be enough this time, just in case. And no, Kate and Leo will not be on board. Confession, my dear friends, gives us the opportunity to revisit our epic crashes, to memorialize what we've lost as a result of possibly our own sin, but then to continue steaming forward toward a new future made possible with Jesus Christ, whose own death and resurrection endures, and we will land safely on the other side.
You've been listening to Special Moments in Orthodoxy with Father Christopher Metropolis. This has been a production of the Orthodox Christian Network.